What to do if your beanie is too small? First of all, let's talk about the gauge swatch. So you've got your little piece here. This is not quite big enough to be a gauge swatch, but let's pretend you have it like this and you're measuring it. If it's too small, at that point, double check your yarn. This is chunky yarn. This is the chunky / bulky weight yarn. If you follow the pattern that's meant to be done with bulky weight yarn, but you use worsted weight yarn, it's gonna be way too small. It can still happen though, even if you're using bulky weight yarn. If you're using a different brand, bulky weight yarn can have quite a bit of variation in it. So if you're using bulky weight yarn and it's too small, then you might just need to use a bigger hook. So like I would start with this L hook is what I typically use for this. This is actually what it says on the label of the bulky weight yarn that I use, is to use an L hook. But if it's too small, that means you're crocheting tighter than I do, which is fine. You just need to go up to an M hook at that point and do your swatch again and see if it's the right size. Then what do you do though if you get to the point where your beanie is finished, it's like done, and it's too small? If it's like too short, you can just add in some extra rounds on the bottom and make it longer. But if it's like too tight and it's like not like, I've made them for people where it wouldn't even go over their head and it was just like sitting here on top of their head, you know, it was too tight to even go. If that happens, then what you have to do is you have to rip it out back up to this point of the crown where you made the circle and you were doing increases. If it's like that in the case of this worsted weight yarn beanie, we know that we need to do 12 rounds of increases and get to 72 stitches per round and go all the way around. If that turns out to be too small and you want to fix it, you got to rip the beanie out up to here of that last round, round 12. That's a good reason to leave the stitch marker in, or you can just count down from the top. You can count down your 12 and find this spot again if you took the stitch marker out. So you'd rip out up to here, and then you would add in one more round of increasing. So you do round 13 of increasing. You do your 6 more, follow the same pattern. You're doing 6 more increases in round 13. So you'll get up to 78 stitches in the round. And then you will start doing your plain rounds until you get to the end of the pattern. And that will make it bigger. If it's somehow way off and you can't fix it by just like pulling it out to here and adding another increase round, then you can start over, but you'll want to use a bigger hook when you start over. If it's too small, it means you're crocheting really tightly. So you could try to crochet more loosely, but that's really hard. It's really hard to gauge like how tight or loose you're crocheting. So the better way is to just change your hook size. So hopefully that helps. Do your first few rounds and measure it. And if it's too big or too small, you can adjust at that point. Hopefully you won't have to get to the point of finishing it and then having to rip out so much work. Maybe you're stressed out and you're like crocheting really tight, then you got to make adjustments. If you make a beanie and it's the wrong size, it's the rite of passage. We all do it. It's not a big deal. Either start over, make a new one, rip it out and fix it. It's okay.